Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the full moon in Aquarius occurring on August 19th, 2024 at 1:25 Central Standard Time, which is my time zone in the Chicago area. But if you live in Europe, it will be on the 19th as well. I would say the Southern Hemisphere, it will be on the 20th. And it's going to be at 27 degrees of Aquarius. Okay. So it's going to be at a later degree. And for fun, I just want to give a couple of the Native American names for this moon. It was called the full sturgeon moon. It's been called that because of the amount of sturgeon. I don't know if it's sturgeons in the Great Lakes. And also harvest moon for the Dakota indigenous people. And black cherries moon, another tribe, corn moon. A couple of tribes called it that. And yes, the corn is ready for harvest in August for sure. They're going to have a corn roasting celebration this weekend as I record this in an earlier week in August. But in any case, yeah. So this full moon in Aquarius, if we think about what Aquarius stands for, Aquarius rules the 11th house in astrology, and that house is about the collective. So whether we're talking about humanity as a whole or different groups of people, this is a time when, if we look at the full moon as a time of awareness of how we are aware of our togetherness. And in the United States, this happens to be the first night of the Democratic Convention. And it's really funny because I was listening to another astrologer who happened to mention this, and I was wondering if other astrologers would pick up on this, because a lot of times they don't talk specifically about, political events. People want to shy away from that, but it has nothing to do with politics in particular. I mean, it does and it doesn't, but that's not the angle that I'm taking with this. I'm just saying that it just so happens that this is the opening night. And I was, even though this is occurring in Chicago, it's going to be exact, the full moon at 1:25 p.m. in Chicago. I kind of progressed the time for 7 o'clock, because I figured that would probably be when the prime time of the first night of the convention would be. And it was very interesting because the cusp of the 10th house, the midheaven, was at an early degree of Sagittarius. And the reason that I find this very interesting is because Sagittarius is connected to truth. And I honestly feel that this is going to be one of those pivotal moments where things start to come out. And we know this already. As a matter of fact, a month ago, at the full moon in Capricorn, that was the time when the President of the United States, Biden, announced that he was not going to campaign anymore. Now, I don't want to, get too much into that, into kind of theorizing whether or not that was the official story. Let's put it that way. And there was a lot of kind of a delay before we got there, this announcement. So I think that there is going to be some kind of revelation or that affects humanity. I realize that I am speaking about the United States, and maybe the rest of the world isn't plugged into American politics or American current events, and that's fine. That makes a lot of sense. But I do believe that this full moon does connect us all, and so there's a saying: "Where we go one, we go all." So let's look at it from that perspective, because it certainly could impact other countries, whatever happens. And I can't guarantee that it's going to happen on the first night, because I'm not quite sure how it progresses. Like, there's like different, it's going to take place over 4 nights. The Republican convention already took place in July. And so it's a 4-night affair. And they have already revealed who the running mate is, so it's not going to be any kind of a surprise. This could be an open convention. And I was actually looking for signs of that. An open convention is when it's up for grabs. And actually, this is the kind of thing that would always occur. I remember 40 years ago, which sounds like forever. I remember 1984 staying up all night and watching the convention and watching them. They always talk about they would do it in smoke-filled rooms, back rooms. So there would be, different front runners, and then they would kind of decide who was going to be the nominee, ostensibly through the delegates and, who has the most support. But, the 1968 convention that was in Chicago ended in riots because of a lot of chaos at the convention. And so I found it very interesting that the convention was even being held in Chicago this year, because Chicago has definitely been in the news for its own issues. And, in 2020, there was some civil unrest in Chicago. So we will see what happens. But I wanted to point out, because we talk about does the chart show any civil unrest or some of the aspects? And what I will say is that the Sun, Moon, and Mercury are all squaring off to Uranus. Uranus is the planet of rebellion. And also another thing that could suggest this as well is that Mars is in conjunction with Jupiter, and they are both in Gemini. Gemini is one of 2 signs that is ruled by Mercury. Okay, so Venus is in Virgo, and that's, Virgo is the sign ruled by Mercury. And the Sun is close to changing into Virgo, but it's not there yet. So Gemini rules the 3rd house in astrology, and that has to do with social media, but the media in general. Mars in Gemini is kind of voracious and also fast-paced news events, kind of just like, a dizzying speed, especially when it's in conjunction with Jupiter, which expands, blows up whatever it is forming a contact with. So we can expect that there will be a lot of news in maybe a short period of time. And kind of like almost hard to keep up with. But also Mars is squaring off to Neptune. Neptune is in its own sign of Pisces at the 29th degree. It won't get to Aries this year, but it is flirting with it. And this is called the critical degree. This is indicating that there is this culmination effect of it being at this last degree. And so that kind of heightens everything. It can create, it's like very intense. And so when we look at what is happening on this particular date, with a conjunction from Mars to Jupiter, people's actions can be overdone, and we see this sometimes when people overreact. You can think of Mars as a reaction, and Mars can really be hasty in what it's doing. And with Jupiter, Jupiter is excessive. So, yeah, that is happening, and the fact that it's on a full moon, the emotions are engaged. Aquarius is an air sign, so it's not emotional in that sense. It's very detached, actually. But the thing about it is that sometimes people have ideas, and that's kind of what the air signs represent, concepts of what is good in life and what, is worth fighting for. But it's all theoretical. It's not, kind of a grounded mentality. So people can go off and do things that they later regret. And it doesn't, and I'm not talking about violence necessarily. It can be diluted action. And this is especially the case because Mars is squaring off to Jupiter. And this can be the person who does something out of a sense of idealism, but they really have no idea what they're getting themselves into. So we will see what is happening. I know that there is a protest, a Palestinian protest, that is taking place at a nearby park that is nearby United Center, which is where the convention is going to be held. So I thought that it was going to be a virtual convention, meaning that, because that's what they did in 2020, where they did it, well, I was going to say via Zoom, but it wasn't that bad. It was like, they just had, they had no audience, in other words. And that was the year of the shutdown. So that was the reason that they decided to do that. But I heard that was going to be like a hybrid convention where some of it was not live or not live in front of an audience. And this sounds like they're kind of like priming themselves for an open convention. And and when I look at these aspects, these hard aspects to Uranus, the Uranian type of situation in it, and actually Uranus squares the midheaven too, that can indicate that there is the midheaven is like the midheaven can represent the government, authority figures, because that's the 10th house. And so to have Uranus squaring that is very, very interesting. But the other indicating factor is that Mars is squaring off to Saturn. Saturn is the ruler of the 10th house in astrology and is authority and all those things I said, the government and all that. So for Mars, which is that rebellious energy, to square the government or the Saturn, and Saturn is the lord of karma as well, that tells it all. And really, when I think of Aquarius, the populism, and that is the power to the people. Pluto, where is Pluto? Well, Pluto is at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So it's on the cusp. It's retrograding. It's on the cusp with Capricorn, the ruler of the 10th in astrology. So all of these things that are happening can make it hard to predict how it's all going to play out. Looking at some of the individual planets and signs, the sun in Leo, this is the sun rules Leo. So really, this is about our individual selves. Why is that important? That's why when we look at our sun signs, we're looking at how we individually shine a light through our creativity, through our self-expression, and how that impacts the collective, which we think of as Aquarius. Now, why is that important? Because all of us came here for that purpose. At least that's what I feel. We didn't come here to be something that we're not. We came here to be 100% ourselves. And that's what's required of us at the end of the day, is just to be ourselves. But at the same time, we are part of the whole. And that's what Aquarius represents. And so this polarity between the individual and the collective is playing out on a public stage. And Mercury is in Leo. And another thing about Leo is about dignity. And so we talk about personal dignity when we look at the Leo archetype. And that's why we talk about pride when we talk about Leo. But there is there's a egocentric or a narcissistic version of pride that's really more arrogance. But there's also the self-love version, which is about not only loving others, but loving self. And, choosing to be, and I was going to say demanding that we are given that dignity, but you can't really demand that other people respect you. It's really that you carry yourself in a way that other people can't help but respect you, because you're not begging for that. So like I said, Venus is in Virgo and Mars is in Gemini. And the Mars energy really jumps out at me. Another thing about Mars and Gemini in terms of actions is that there can be a lot of hyperactivity and a lot of scattering of energies. So it's not something that is really like grounded. And so it may be that we're hearing rumors, and then we, during this day, and this can carry the energy of the full moon, you might say, can carry itself for the next few days, which just so happens to be those nights of the convention. And we may see some fallout from what this all represents. But other aspects that are happening that are interesting and connected to this, I would say the sun in conjunction with Mercury. So yeah, I mean, that really is front and center, this idea of getting the news and maybe communicating it to others. I think of a site like X, formerly known as Twitter, where people retweet things. They kind of spread it. Now, it's very easy to spread falsehoods too, that you not intentionally, although some people might do that, but thinking that they're true. So misinformation can get circulated too, because people are hasty and they're just kind of in that moment. I think one of the things that I want to mention about the hard angles to Uranus. The sun squaring to Uranus is really about, and this is kind of like the story of humanity, the ability to be individuals. We really are conditioned in society to conform to some kind of standard. And, even like the kind of work that we go into, which the sun can represent the career and whatnot, we are conditioned to do certain things because it helps the society. It helps, like when public schools, the Industrial Revolution, they needed, obedient factory workers. So, kind of like conditioning students, preparing them to be those kinds of workers. And that kind of like factory assembly line mentality, kind of like standardized tests, this, that, those kinds of things. We still have that, but it's starting to be questioned, starting to be dismantled for different reasons. And part of that is Pluto having been in Capricorn, and Pluto is poised to retrograde back into Capricorn in September, actually September 1st. So we're going to see from September 1st through November 19th, when Pluto goes back into Aquarius at that point, we're going to see that reemergence of the authority trying to reassert itself and try to wrestle the power back from the populace. But it is, it's all over but the shouting. It's funny because I was just reading, I think even now we're starting to get those early glimpses of it, because Pluto is such a slow-moving planet that even though it's not officially in Capricorn, it is on the cusp. And like out of the UK, like this crazy policy that is currently in place involving social media. Again, social media, and that's going to be the story, because first of all, with Jupiter and Gemini, and Saturn and Pisces, that's another thing that I should have mentioned. Oh yeah, I did mention Mars squaring Saturn, and that that really does illustrate that, is trying to punish people through their social media accounts, or try to gain control through that. But the genie is out of the bottle, so it will be this kind of illusory state for a couple of months before the full, well, it's probably not the full, but the first signs of the Aquarian age, with Pluto going back into Aquarius and staying there for the next 20 years, starting on November 19th, will kick off the revolution. So, and a lot of people probably know that the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was during the American Revolution and the French Revolution. So suffice it to say, these movements really had a long-range impact on the countries they represented, but probably more symbolically for more widespread areas. The moon is trining Mars, and the moon is trining Jupiter. So this is a bright spot because the moon represents the emotions, and trining Mars means that people are, and trining Jupiter means that people are acting with positivity. They're not coming from, because Mars can be anger, And certainly, I mean, I don't want to make it seem like there's not going to be any rebellion, because there could very well be, but they're coming from a good place. And that is important, because if we hear the word rebellion and we think of something like a person who's just angry at the world, that's not necessarily the case. It can be somebody who is excited about the fact that they are going to be able to call their own shots, and that they have chosen at a higher level this particular moment in history, probably the greatest. This is what I have heard others say, and it really deeply resonates with me, this idea of the greatest turning point in history, the most important turning point for humanity in the history of our evolution, and that we have front row seats. How exciting is that? But at the same time, because a lot of us have, been on this planet for decades, we know how it used to be. And it's very hard sometimes to reconcile what was with what is right now, for instance, and the craziness that is, everyday life now. Now, it could be a lot worse, but we don't know what the future months will hold for us, let alone the next few years. So we've already seen how it's been, and that is crazy enough compared to how life used to be. But this is part of that growing pains period where we have to experience a transition. And yes, it can get messy, because the old guard and the new, I don't even want to call them guard. It's like the people are the ones who are, banding together and not wishing to be ruled in the same way anymore. That is not something that can just smoothly transition. There are going to be kind of bumps in the road, but at the very least, if the people have like a good spirit about it, that is a comforting thought. So anyway, that's what I have for you. I hope that we see this new moon as a time of freedom, because Uranus is the great liberator, and Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. But interestingly, Aquarius is also ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is that ruler of the 10th house in astrology and deals with the authority. So it's kind of that's like so Aquarian to me, because the sign of Aquarius can be kind of contrarian, and to have the most radical influence along with the most conservative is hilarious. So anyway, thanks for listening, and I hope you have a happy full moon in Aquarius. Take care. Bye.